Today's Kids Corner takes place in the country of Sweden long ago, in the northern part of that country. And maybe you've heard of Sweden before. Sweden is in northern Europe, and it's part of those countries called Scandinavia. They're so far north that the farthest reaches of the northern parts of those countries, well, they end in the Arctic Circle, or what we call the North Pole. And so very cold there, lots of snow and ice. And so that's where we find ourselves today, in the land of Sweden, in the town of Morka. Morka is a Swedish name, and the word means darkness. And this town was rightly named. Why? Because it was so far north in Sweden that they got very little daylight or sunlight during the winter months. And the spring and the summer and the fall, those growing seasons, they were very short. And so it was the land or the town of darkness, because they experienced so much darkness. So all year round, except for those few days when it was sunny and the sky was bright, they experienced different shades of black and white and gray, just kind of blah. But the people there, they weren't blah. They were very kind-hearted people. They loved their families. They loved their country. They loved their friends and neighbors. And of course, most importantly, they loved God. That's what the townspeople were known for. So very kind-hearted, very loving people. But as the years rolled on after they had established their little village up there, they started to notice something because of so much darkness that they were living in. And that was this, that the people who couldn't get outside during the winter months, the long winter months, the old people, the very, very young, the sick people, those who had some type of physical disability, they were kind of stuck indoors for those months. They would get discouraged, or even what we call depressed. A kind of sadness would settle in. Sometimes they could look outside. If it was snowing gently, that was pretty to look at. Maybe reindeer would go by from time to time. Sometimes they could see the children ice skating on the ponds or sledding down the hills, and that would lift their spirits. But if those things weren't going on, or if it was just dark outside, their spirits would just kind of go very low, and they would feel bad. And so one day there were these cousins. All four of them were girls. They were all related to each other because they had the same grandma and grandpa. And yet they came from four different families. These four girl cousins were playing together one day at one of their houses. And they said, this is really sad that we live in such a dark place. I hear that there's other places in the world where there's a lot more sunlight. In fact, one of the girls said, when I grow up and get old enough to decide what I want to do, I'm going to leave Morka and I'm going to move to a place on earth where there's most of the year, it's mostly sunlight, and there's flowers that bloom all year round. You see, these four cousins, I told you they had the same grandparents. Well, their grandmother loved flowers. And she told them that the thing that was so special about flowers is that God made them. And God made them and gave them to us even though He didn't have to. He did it just because. It was as though He wanted to make us smile, to bring us some happiness, some beauty. And He wanted to show us how creative He was, how amazing He was. And yet we got to enjoy some of the things that are beautiful in this world that reflect how beautiful and how great our God is. I got some flowers here that I got at the store the other day for my wife for her birthday. In fact, we've had them for over a week now. They still look so beautiful. There's purple and green and white, and They still smell good too. Flowers, there's so much about them to enjoy. They smell good, many of them do, and they're so beautiful, and there's so many different kinds. And so that's what this cousin said to her three other cousins. I'm going to move and leave and never come back to Morka because it's so depressing and dark. But one of the other cousins said, you know what? There's another thing that you could do. Instead of leaving your hometown and never looking back, you could go to some of those places where flowers bloom all year round and bring some of them back here. But the cousin said, well, I can't do that. If I did, those flowers would die. They come from warmer climates. And the cousin said, no. Bring them back and we'll keep them inside during the winter months. We'll learn how to care for them. And we can have flowers all year round as well and enjoy the beauty and the fragrance. And it might lift our spirits and maybe the spirits of the people around us. Well, all four of the cousins thought that was a great idea. They shared it with their grandmother. She thought it was a great idea. And when they got old enough and had an opportunity to travel, one of them and then another, they would go to warm weather places and buy these flowers, these plants that flowered, and bring them back. And when they couldn't travel, because then they started to have a family and children of their own, and they had to stay there in their village and buy their homes, they would give money to travelers who would be going to those places to bring back more and more flowering plants. And so these young girls who turned into ladies and moms of their own, they began to have more and more of these flowers, and they would share them with each other, and their four homes were just full of flowers until one day one of the cousins said, I've got too many flowers in my house. What are we going to do? And another one of them said, I know what we can do. Let's build a greenhouse. You know those buildings that have glass on the ceiling and then sometimes glass on the sides as well, and you heat them up in the winter and they get all the sunlight that comes in? Well, we've been putting our flowers by the windows of our house, but we can build a whole house of windows and fill them all up and then have lots and lots of flowers and share them with other people. Well, that's what these ladies did. Their husbands and their children and their friends helped them build greenhouses. And they planted flowers upon flowers upon flowers. They had more than they knew what to do with. And they passed them out so that all throughout the town, in the public buildings like the schools and the post office and the courthouse and even the churches, all these buildings had flowering plants all throughout them, so that instead of being gray and black and white, they were full of color, and it smelled so good. And what they noticed is that people's spirits started to lift in the summer. They weren't pressing their nose up against the window, just praying for spring to come. Please, Lord, send the flowers and send the warmth and send the sunshine. Well, they wanted all that, but they enjoyed being inside as well now, because not only were the public buildings, but all their houses were filled with flowers. And even their churches, they put flowers in them. And it reminded them of the beauty of God that He's made all over the world, that they could have all year round, right in their little town of Morka. Well, only they decided after so many years and so many flowers to rename their town. And from Morka to just plain Flowertown. That's how people came to know this town. And people would travel from all over Sweden and all over the rest of Scandinavia, and even as their reputation grew, from other parts of the world to come spend part of their winter there in one of the coldest places on earth, so that they could enjoy all these beautiful flowers that these ladies and now the people in the town grew all year long. Oh, it's pretty neat because it cheered people up and gave them just a brighter spirit. And they were so thankful to God for flowers and for His beauty. You know, it did something else as well. Some people are shyer than others. It's just kind of hard for them to figure out, what do I say and how do I interact with other people? Well, they discovered something. You'd find yourself maybe at school or at church or some other place, and you're kind of standing there and somebody else is standing there. You don't really know them that well, or you don't have a lot in common, and the two people are both shy. So instead of just standing there quietly and not talking like they normally would have, well, they found that they did have something in common. Because everyone in Flowertown, well, they knew about flowers. And so it wouldn't be very many feet from anyone in any building in Flowertown to be next to a flower. Some beautiful red or yellow or green or pink flowering plant. And so one person would say to the other, do you know what that one is? Because they, by this time, had hundreds of different kinds of flowers. And the other one would say, yes, I do know what that is. It's called, and it comes from India. And they even use it to make this medicine to cure this disease. And the other person would say, yeah, and that's my uncle's favorite flower. And the other person would say, oh, that's my mom's favorite flower. And they would be able to have this whole conversation on flowers because everyone in Flowertown was an expert. When people from other places would come, well, they would ask the locals, the people who lived in Flowertown, what's this flower called? And what's this flower called? And then it gave them an opportunity to meet new people from all over the world and to tell them about the great God who made all these flowers. Well, I got to tell you, boys and girls, if the world that we live in, that's broken and full of sin, kind of messed up in a lot of ways, still has so much beauty in it, like the beauty of flowers, what must heaven be like? I can't imagine that. Or the Bible tells us there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. What must that be like? It tells me how great and loving and kind and creative our God is. And so this simple little story about these 4 girls who changed a town and pointed them to God and His beauty makes us think about God and His beauty. The next time you see a flower, whether it's inside in the middle of the winter or outside in a field or in someone's yard, enjoy the beauty and remember to say, thank you, God. Thank you for giving that to me to put a smile on my face and joy in my heart because you're such a kind God.